Joining us from BNP Paribas, their chief North American economist, to sort out this mess, Julia Coronado. Dr. Coronado, good noon to you.
Good to see you, Tom.
You have been cautious on the American economy. Others are lifting up their fourth quarter GDP. Are you going to capitulate here and talk about a more buoyant U.S. economy?
Well, I'd say that there has been some relief that there hasn't been, the recessionary scenario does not appear to be playing out, and so that is definitely good news. That said, I don't see many signs of acceleration into Q4. Certainly this morning's report is sort of more of the same. Okay, job growth, not terribly strong, not really generating a lot of income for consumers. So I'd say Q4 looks like more of the same, maybe even a little bit softer than Q3.
Right. Nice tiptoeing there, Juliana. That was very good. Steve Roach here with a note, writing up what we heard on Bloomberg Radio yesterday. Like zombies of the post-bubble Japan, America's zombie consumers are struggling to regain their economic footing after years of unbridled excess. That from Roach of Yale and Morgan Stanley. Julia, this is in your camp. Why do economists keep talking about a buoyant U.S. consumer?
You got me. I mean, consumers are kind of telling you where they're at. You know, it's true that sentiment, low sentiment hasn't led us into a double-dip recession, but I place my bets on a consumer that's continuing to be cautious, which means if you get a good quarter of spending, more than likely you're going to see some soft spending around the corner rather than a straight line up. And I think we saw that in the chain store sales yesterday. Pretty much disappointing across the board. A decline. Look, we're looking probably for a decline in retail sales for October. So, you know, it's just ebbing and flowing around a fairly low pace of growth.
Julia, when you look at this consumer and this raging debate, how do you measure a buoyant consumer? The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index, 53, is a terrible statistic. How do you measure consumption? What's the best way to measure what the spirit is?
Well, there's a lot of things that we look at. One is the discretionary parts of consumption, so what consumers actually choose to do. I mean, you don't have much control over what you spend on utilities and health insurance and housing, but you do have control about how many clothes you buy and how many movies you see and how many restaurant meals you buy. So watching those indicators often tells us, lets us take the temperature of the consumer. And again, we saw a pretty okay performance in Q3. Probably my expectation is we'll get a softer number in Q4. Not a disaster, but again, the consumer's going to take a breather because they've just spent a bit of money and now they're going to pull back and shore up those savings again.
Let's look at a snapshot of what Dr. Coronado and Dr. Roach over at Morgan Stanley are talking about. This is a great chart. I've seen this many ways, many interpretations. There is a regression. That red line is a center line of really the spirit of our pocketbook. This is inflation-adjusted, personal, disposable income. Boy, something has changed about 2006, 2007. We just roll over. Julia Coronado, why did we roll over? What happened in 06?
For personal disposable income,
yeah.
you entered one of the worst job markets since the Great Depression, and really things haven't gotten all that much better. So one of the things that's happened most recently is that even though inflation's come off a bit, wage and salary growth has actually slowed pretty tremendously. So nominal dollars that people are taking home has slowed quite a lot, and we haven't yet seen that feed into spending. We didn't see that in Q3, but I'm guessing we will see that. As consumers, again, they'll react to that loss of purchasing power by being a little bit more conservative on the spending side.
Julia, in our time we have left you, let's switch to Europe, even though you're the North American economist for the French bank. This chart, folks, I think is fascinating. It is a decade. It's an elegant chart. And it compares German exports in U.S. dollars to U.S. exports in U.S. dollars. Julia, we really don't understand what an export dynamo Germany is. I mean, you can see there, folks. Bring the chart up again, if you would. Victor, I want you to work overtime. Victor, come on, get ready for the Bills-Jets game. You can see there, Germany just explodes and then recovers so well. They really are an export dynamo, aren't they?
They are. They definitely are. But that leaves them vulnerable right now on two fronts. One, we've seen the slowing in China and Asia generally. And two, one of their biggest export partners are the other Eurozone countries. So if those countries are slowing, and in fact, the leading indicators for Germany sure have been weak lately.
Okay,
so.
Let's talk about one of the big unintended consequences here, Dr. Coronado. We go through this ballet. Something happens in Europe. The president just spoke heatedly on it. The unintended consequence for Germany is a very weak dollar and a very strong euro.
Right.
I mean, the worst outcome here for Germany is a 145 euro, isn't it?
Right.
What's the likelihood of that happening?
It's pretty likely, given how reluctant the ECB has been to follow the Fed's path and being aggressively easy. Now, perhaps Draghi is a new regime, and we might see some easier policy from Europe because they certainly do need it. They need probably another rate cut, and they need quantitative easing, and that's something that the Fed has understood all along, and it's led to a weak dollar, which has helped our economy. And Germany is absolutely going to be hurt by a 145 euro.
Mark down November 4th, folks. About 6 months from now, we'll talk about this. The unintended consequences of a successful resolution in Europe could be a much stronger euro. I know Goldman Sachs in that camp as well. Julia Coronado, thank you so much. And what am I